I'm going, oh wait, lights, camera. No, I screwed it up, man. I screwed up the audio. I just, you know, yeah. Daniel takes the sin upon himself. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, we're rolling. Let me drop a link for you as I do, because the service here is just fantastic, as you're well aware. Takes the sin upon himself. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, can somebody, would somebody mind for you jumping over to YouTube from your angle and just letting me know whether we've got audio going out? I'm going to give you the link. Hang on. Much apologetic. There's a link right there. Would somebody mind just tell me if that is producing audio from your perspective, from your angle? Because I was just giving it a watch, and it doesn't look like there's audio to me, but I think I may have a view. It's all screwed up. What I'm going to do, I talked about this in 3450 yesterday. What I'm going to do, you have or had, Dave, conjugate that verb, man. Have, thank you, sir. Yeah, Frozen. The audio, the day that I went for the audio from Cringely coming out of the laptop into the laptop and took the buds out, that's when it got screwed up. So what I'm going to do today, I have a weird idea. I'm going to try to see whether we can make this happen or something. I don't know. But I don't know if we're even going to get to Cringely today, because I want to talk current events. Let me look back real quick. Class online, blah blah blah. I'm just looking back at the previous comments. All right. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Interval. So audio is working on YouTube right now for this stream. I think the key is I have recently, as in the last couple of months, acquired a Windows laptop, which thing I have not had for a long time. My world is pretty much this MacBook Pro with a keyboard. This is my 3-year-old MacBook Pro with a keyboard so bad that I have to put a separate Bluetooth keyboard over the top of it because the built-in keyboard is so reprehensible. Um, but let's see. It turns out that some of what I'm trying to do is more sort of natively doable with Discord and on a Mac, on a Windows machine, and not on a Mac. And so there's a few, and I don't know if that's because of limitations in the low level API that's available. I don't really know what's the cause of that, but or if it's just a bug in the Mac, and I don't know. But I'm going to try to see if I can just use the Windows machine. I mentioned I'm going to give you just a teaser, and then I'm going to unapologetically move on. I'll disclose the secret of the teaser in April. But I have had a change in certain uh, life circumstances / time commitment factor that has led me to have a difficult time making my butt to campus. As a byproduct, I am leaning very strongly on doing class remote for the going the distance. The problem is it makes it hard for us to watch The Social Dilemma together, which is on Netflix. And let me start with a survey. Um, The question is, drop your Y or your N on this survey. Okay with class being remote for the rest of the semester? I do like the face-to-face for a lot of things, and I'm not even at this point, I'm not freaked out about Omicron anymore. I am one of the few, I think, people in the world. I don't know. I'm in a slim minority of people. I have been vaccinated twice, boosted once. I have been on a couple of airplanes, been to Europe, back. What else? Oh yeah, cross country, hotels, etc. Have not had COVID. I think I'm like the only person I know who has not. Actually, let's go one more. One more. Um, Yeah, Jake asked, that's a great question, man. What if we only came in for like a day to watch the movie and the rest is remote? That is absolutely a possibility. And then on that day, we can kind of just use. The problem is when I've tried to stream that movie, then YouTube shuts it down for copyright. So that could be a day where we do it in class, watch the movie in class, talk about it, and then let the in-class system record it. So that day's class, for those that can't be there, they're sick, or otherwise can't be in class at the appointed time, would have to watch it through the built-in system in the classroom. No, I like that, Jake. I like that a lot. A little bit in person is it's just nice. See your beautiful smiling faces. Um, I mean, it's the human touch. And I think there's for some of you, I don't know. Some of you, I think you zone out or you just, whatever, log in, sign the attendance roll, and walk away. Speaking of which, sign attendance. Por favor, sign the attendance, please. I like that. That's a 25 to zilch on remote. You're animals. But I don't disagree. And I will share with you in April what is going on in the life of one Dr. Knudsen. The reality is, so Sam just said the digital touch is nice, and the reality is, I find that the comments, you guys are so pithy. That's Pithy, not to be confused with pissy. You're also sometimes pissy, but mostly you're pithy, which, if you want to look that up, is it kind of has to do with a sort of a cleverness, being kind of funny and clever. No, I love the pithy comments. And the memes and the interactions on the chat. I mean, that's actually a value that you don't get in the classroom. And I haven't had a real smooth way. I can do it, but it takes me about 15 minutes, which is the only gap we have between classes, to set it up so that we've got kind of the live streaming and everything's, when we're doing it in the classroom. When we do it in the remote, it's just boom, home office. Speaking of which, hang on. Over here, because I got the headphones, I have the dank closet, and if I don't close that door, a monster will come out of there in the class when I can't see it. It will eat me or something. Um, okay. Here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the frickin'. I want to talk about. I want to talk about Ukraine. So now the topic of the class is kind of ethical and societal, cultural issues. This is not the official name, but involving technology, right? It's kind of like, I think of it as like computers and society, the technology and society, but we throw the word ethic in there, ethical and societal issues in computing or something like that. And so what I want to try to talk about for a second is what is impressing you with respect to the topic of the class as it sort of, is juxtaposed with war in Ukraine, you know. Um, First of all, I just want to say that, okay, So, feel free to launch in the comments with what you're thinking about. We'll get to, talking about them. But we talked about this last week. Yeah, today's Tuesday. It must have been last Thursday, right? Where we were like, you know, Russia's poised, on the border of Ukraine, and we were like, well, what's the tech? We were like, that's a concern, but has it entered the domain of the classroom of our class? And I'm not talking about. I mean, there's a part where it's like doesn't, yeah, we're also hypersensitive, but not trying to say I only care, if it's in our classroom. I'm just saying that when we first talked about it, excuse me, um, that when we first talked about it, it really hadn't entered the domain of technology in terms of the discussion. It was just like, you know, and I think that's shifted. I mean, immediately once the invasion happened, it feels like it's just completely, you know, transformed. So I'm kind of curious, uh, your take on that. I have my own, right? Okay, so Gittid said, cyber warfare and Swift. Please jump in. Gittid, if you want to take the lead on that, or anybody else that wants to talk specifically about cyber warfare. Um, what do you see happening? What do you already? I've got again. I'm in touch with a few things. Swift is the international financial system. I don't know a ton about it. I'm only going from what I'm reading in news sources, outlets. Um, let me throw a few things, but there was apparently a lot of action um, to cut Russia off, and which becomes kind of a crippling, as I understand it, right? A crippling economic dynamic where you're cut off from money supplies, you're cut off from global markets. And I think that there have been, again, I didn't like, prep a full lecture on this idea, so I'm not coming at this thing as, you know, I'm sure there are at least some of you that are more literate right now than me. Um, but no, the ability to sort of like throw a switch and cut off like a money supply, introduce an artificial, um, uh, an artificial economic sanction, artificially induced, economic hardship. And, I saw today a picture of Russian people, citizens, uh, queued up at Subway because, and I don't know if it's directly related to Swift or to some other system that was taken offline, but credit card processing was taken offline. So all of a sudden, the ability to like swipe your card, buy a train ticket, subway ticket, whatever. Some of those systems were down, so that everybody had to cough up cash. But then the cash supply is going away. People making a run on ATMs, which is, suddenly taking the ruble down, devaluing the ruble. In other words, there's some things that can be done with technology which are um, dramatic and have impact, you know, um, and I think are moral, in the face of the current dynamic. But that's just one thing. The notion of uh, you know the Swift, for example. And I'm just looking to see if anybody else made a comment about Swift. Um, and then, so Steve mentioned Anonymous. Let me come back to them. Um, Dave said, my understanding is that Swift is used mostly to pay for oil exports. My understanding, Dave, and I can be wrong. We already know. We've established Chuck can be wrong. Um, but my understanding is that it is bigger than that, more pervasive, but I may be totally wrong on that one, Dave. So some chapter and verse would be great. And certainly was trying to put pressure on the oligarchs surrounding Putin. An oligarchy, if somebody wants to look that up and drop a definition in the chat, right, is kind of a governance by a powerful group of individuals, usually not elected. They're just assuming power. Um, get it. Google Maps inadvertently showing the locations for both Russian troops and people fleeing. Now, okay, well, let's talk about that for a second. Then we'll get back to Anonymous. Get it made the comment. Let's talk about that for a second. Good or bad? What's your sense? Google Maps. My first instinct is good, but it kind of cuts both ways, especially, I don't know. I've not seen that. I have not seen that. Thank you, Dave, for the article on Swift, which I know it was referred to as a nuclear option. Yeah, Christian said, I'm pretty sure Swift is essential for all people to make international payments. That was my understanding. And again, Christian and I can both be wrong, until we get some chapter and verse here. Okay, Gita just posted the article on the New York Post. Google disables maps tools in Ukraine used to track troops and civilians. Interesting. But what's interesting about this is it's all about information flow. It's all about information flow. Let's talk about Anonymous for a second, right? Infamous hacker group. Pretty confident that Anonymous has done both things that I applauded and things that I did not applaud. I'm sure that in the track record in the rap sheet of Anonymous. Sorry, hang on a second. I am fiddling with a couple of guitar picks, and I keep dropping them on the floor because I'm an idiot. Let me lose the guitar picks here for a sec. No, if you look at the exploits of Anonymous, I'm pretty sure that there are things they've done that I was like, glad that had happened, and other things that I'm, pretty sure I was like, that's not good. And I don't know enough, to tell you which ones, which also keeps me safe. Like I really don't, honestly, I don't remember. But no, the notion that Anonymous is like, um, going after cyber targets, and that's an interesting thing. We had this conversation about, if you remember, I brought this issue up in January, and I asked this question. You're in an American city, and there's a riot, and you happen to make the wrong turn on a street and find yourself um, in the middle of a bunch of people who surround your car and then start, breaking the glass, drag you out, maybe kill you, beat you up, kill you, right? And I raised the question. You don't know the race, ethnicity of any of the people. You don't know the politics of any of the people or what it is they're writing about. Are you okay with what just happened? Right? And I was talking about within the context of a civilized society with a constitution guaranteeing, attempting to guarantee, ostensibly guaranteeing. In practice, of course, not, because no system is going to ever be perfect. But guaranteeing, freedom like due process, right? Due process under the law, equal treatment under the law, presumption of being innocent until proven guilty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Protection from unlawful search and seizure, right? Can't take away life, liberty, pursuit of happiness without due process, and blah blah blah. Right? And in that environment, I kind of said, and I want to just noodle on this for a second. Um, I kind of said, what, that you cannot be in a position where you're okay, say being a clan member and burning a cross on somebody's yard as an act of domestic terrorism, and thinking that's okay, but it's not okay when it happens to you. Somebody else burns, I don't know, right? What it goes back in the other direction. You have to be, or that if somebody disagrees with you, you feel it's justified because their words are violence. Therefore, my physical violence is an equal reaction. Then you have to be okay when your words are met by physical violence, right? In that context, and I was talking specifically about a context of a civil society, right? So what about this? And I'll just tell you where I'm at, but I'd be curious to know what your sense of it. This is to me not a comparable situation. Here you have a country, from what I can tell, living, peaceably and being invaded by a larger bully aggressor. From what I can understand, from the information available to me, you know, and now you're down to the dynamics of war, which is a very, very different dynamic. you know so now, for example, if the riot is in a city in Ukraine and the car in particular is carrying Russian soldiers, I think you're in a very different dynamic because you're not operating in the bounds of a civil society situation. You're in the, you're very much in sort of a self-defense kind of world. But some of you might say, well, then it's just a matter of degree. But I think it's almost always a matter of degree. It's a little bit like the Overton window. There comes a point where you know that you've crossed the line and you're already over here. You know what I mean? If I, as an American citizen, if we were whatever, suddenly what was that movie, Red Dawn? You know, suddenly we're attacked. I would personally have no compunction, you know, shooting a foreign soldier who was attacking my country. To make what I think is a fairly safe statement. Some of you would still say, well, that's still not morally justified and I'd rather die than do that. And I would respect that position, as yours, right? Um, Ethics, I believe, are almost always flying in a gray zone, working in a gray zone without, the blacks and whites, um, you know, are elusive. And I think also our analysis as a culture sometimes is really struggles to deal with the subtlety, you know. Okay, let me see. Let me keep going. I'm looking back down at the um, just looking back for anything about this morality issue I was just talking about. And then I'll kind of go back up. Just scanning. I just want to say one thing. So I want to just say this, and I don't want to go too deep on it. This is in response to what Gitted said. Um, you said to offer some nuance, and you know that I'm a fan of nuance, and I'm going to respect that discussion. NATO expansion is a very worrying prospect for anyone that isn't in NATO, and I don't disagree with that. Um, and then you said a little later, the situation, you posted that picture. The situation must be understood both from the point of view of a history of American/EU imperialism as much as one of Russian aggression. And my main problem with that is that and I don't want to get all the way deep on this because then we get off the topic of technology, but my concern is that NATO is a treaty organization. It's a treaty. It's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Essentially, it just defines allies, allegiances, treaty-bound allegiances that basically say. Notice it starts in 1949. That basically say an act of war against one of these countries would be viewed as an act of war against all of the countries, and they would all come to the defense, in essence, in response to World War II. And so my problem with the map and the statement is I don't view the expansion of NATO, from my perspective, as an act of imperialism. NATO is not occupying the. It's not like the UK, and France and Italy invaded Denmark. You know what I mean? It was like Denmark said, I want to be friends with you guys. And then Poland said, I want to be friends with you guys. And a lot of the countries that joined NATO in the sort of later time period, 99, 2004, et cetera, were former Soviet bloc countries who wanted to be protected against just this kind of aggression. You know what I mean? So you got to show me the NATO countries, you know, putting troops on a border and invading somebody for me to say there's an equivalence. I'm also coming from a country that's a NATO ally. So I'm also inherently biased by my perspective in history, right? Um, Yeah, and then Gideon said, I disagree. The U.S. and allies, particularly France and the UK, have used the NATO structure to foster aggression. And again, I'm not going to disagree with you on that one because again, we got to get down to the particulars. Right now, it's kind of very hand wavy, and we don't have the detail, right? Um, and you're right. We agree that it's not equivalent and that it can't be, but you'd have to. And I don't want to get off this, okay? Because I want to talk about technology. But the notion of what you mean by fostering and what you mean by aggression, that becomes a very important question. But again, this is the real critical thing about this, and part of the respectful dialogue that is so critical, and why I spent so much time in January talking about this. There's got to be a respectful exchange that says, because what I'm really, based on what Gitta just said, I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I mean, again, I don't have time in the context of the class, but I'm thinking, when you're talking about arming Saudi Arabia against Yemen, and Braden said, the point I get out from Gitt's statement is that Russians' view of NATO as a network of allies is similar to looking at a nation's puppet states. Therefore, a nation creating more puppet states creates more enemies of someone, similar to how NATO allies nations together. Yeah. Yeah, and what I like about this, if I can just kind of back up to a meta level for this conversation, is just level of respect. You know what I mean? To say, let me learn, let me understand. Because there are other perspectives, right? So anyway, that's it. And I appreciate the honest share, and I think that I believe that we all are in an environment where we can, be respectful of each other and even disagree. Um, yeah, and so for Christian, once again, I'll just say that the term imperialism gets thrown around a lot, and then it's a matter of degree. That becomes an interesting question, what we mean by imperialism. And that's not a disagreement, Christian. I'm not disagreeing with you. Neither am I agreeing with you because I don't know exactly, what it means. But one thing's for sure is when you get into sort of governmental levels, I don't think anybody's, all the way clean. I don't think any system's clean. I don't think any individuals are entirely clean at that level. You know what I mean? Let me back up. Let me go back up. But I do think it's interesting. I found myself, reading about the invasion and then seeing Anonymous go to town. And, and I don't think that I'm, historically. Oh, hang on. I was going to blow that up. I should have blown that up earlier. I don't think that historically we would have, most people would be like, yeah, go Anonymous, take them out. But all of a sudden, you're just like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or as they sometimes say, politics makes strange bedfellows, as they sometimes say. Um, Let me see. Scanning back. Okay, Steve, I just want to say I'm going all the way back to Steve with the Ukrainian president juxtaposed against a picture of Ted Cruz. That is what's the word? What's the word? It's a logical fallacy. I mean, it is a complete appeal to emotion. Just want to say, Steve, you know what I mean? And I think you got to say it may be funny, you know, but it's a which logical fallacy is it? False comparison, false equivalence. I think we call it false equivalence. Besides the fact that I don't even know what the context is. You know what I mean? I don't know what's the context of Ted Cruz. Like, because what are you know what I'm saying, Steve? I'm just calling you out on the logical fallacy. I'm not even arguing the point I think you're trying to make. I'm just arguing how you're doing it, because I don't know the context for either picture, and I don't know if because so what if it were a pic? Would you post a picture of? I don't know what your politics are, nor do I care, but would you post a picture of Joe Biden walking through an airport, pulling his luggage, and have the same content and have the same caption of "spot the difference"? It's not an argument. It's just like, you know what I mean? If you're already, a sort of anti-Republican, yeah, yeah, that's right. That that's bad. But it's not an argument. It makes no point whatsoever. Like literally whatsoever. It makes no point. And I'm not even saying, you understand, I'm not saying I disagree with the point you're trying to make. I'm simply calling out how you're making it, which is via logical fallacy and an appeal to emotion. And by the way, no persuasive power whatsoever for somebody who is not already aligned with your target audience. And I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of, an argument that just rallies the base but has no persuasive power because there's no actual message in it. You're just rallying the base. And again, I don't care who the base is, whether this is left or right. Um, okay, all the way back to 20, 22 minutes ago, CR posted a cleantechnica.com article. Looks incredibly interesting. I haven't read it, so I'm not advocating it, but the title is How Tech Companies Are Responding to Russia's Invasion of Ukraine. Thank you, CR, for posting that. Yeah, and then somebody made the comment right afterwards, about Elon Musk deploying. Oh man, what's the satellite? What's the satellite system called? That the Musk satellite system, deploying that, right? Because one of the things you do, um, in this, kind of, you invade somebody, is you take out the communication infrastructure, because the ability to communicate is central to the ability to defend yourself or to fight back, right? You have to be able to coordinate and communicate. So you take out the communication infrastructure. Well, when somebody can just deploy satellites on the fly, and allow everybody to continue to have communication infrastructure, it's quite a it's an incredible thing. Um, Now my question becomes, for everybody in favor of supporting Ukraine, who also, this is a real question as we're discussing ethics. Let's just say you're of the perspective, one that I personally find indefensible, that the possession of $1 billion in and of itself makes you an evil person. I don't believe that. And I do believe that there are people who espouse something that sounds like that. That is, in fact, their position. I'm not saying everybody. I'm sure there are some who would say, no, I don't have the problem if they have money. I have a problem with how they made money. But then you have to press and say, do you feel that way about everybody with that amount of money? And I've had this conversation where it's like, but do you feel that way about everybody that has this amount of money? And the answer often is yes. So now you're drawing a potential false equivalence of possession of money with an evil way of getting money, or the notion that any inequality is by its nature immoral, which I don't believe that either. Um, Again, kind of hearkening to my sort of more libertarian roots. Um, but anyway, I'm just saying, for the people who already believe that Musk was evil because he's a billionaire, but a good guy because he smokes pot, but a bad guy because he was on Joe Rogan, and a good guy because he deploys satellites over Ukraine, what do you do? I mean, and I think this is the difficulty with labeling somebody as sort of all good or all bad based upon whether their action jives with your policy preference. Does that make sense? This is this is a real struggle, I think, to think about, to try to label somebody as sort of all good or all bad. This is black and white thinking as well, which is not a sign of real clear thinking in my view, or clear emotional sort of grounding. The black and white thinking, things are all black, they're all white, they're all binary, one or zero. That sort of thinking, in my view, is not healthy. Um, but then when you've got a guy like Elon Musk that you hate because he's a billionaire, but because he's a billionaire, he can deploy all the satellites. Now you have a decision to make about how you feel about it. Um, Dave mentioned the propaganda wheel. I'm still 20 minutes behind, 25 behind. The propaganda wheel, Western spin versus Russian spin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what's interesting though? The propaganda war is very real, partially because of the satellite thing. But one of the things that I've been intrigued by is the notion. I was watching video of Ukrainians, just citizens. Everything's still quiet. Troops are advancing on your city, and you're just, a bunch of people in the center of the city building Molotov cocktails. You know, just some of them are chatting, some of them were laughing. It's just but this obvious sort of, you know, sadness, tension. But just the notion, and I got really emotional when I saw this, because I think that at no time, I mean, it's been almost 100 years, 90 years since the last, armed aggression, invasion of an entire country. I'm taking Russia invading Crimea out of that analysis in terms of, a moving from a sort of contested area. And I'm not trying to say, oh, that's better, but there is a difference between a contested area and a just invade a country to sort of take it over or install a puppet government or whatever. Um, it's been almost 100 years, and the last time it was World War II. It's been a really, really long time, and one of the big differences right now is that we've got tweets coming out. The communication between the Ukrainian president and Elon Musk was via Twitter. Where he was like, hey, at Elon Musk, how about some satellites over here? And it's just never been this personal. Okay, so there's a famous, it was a Pulitzer Prize winning, I'm pretty sure it was a Pulitzer Prize winning photograph. And it was in Vietnam, and it was a picture of people. And I believe the people, I know you know the one, if somebody can find it, it's disturbing, but it sort of children and elderly, and they're running out of a city and having basically been napalmed, and sort of in the center is a girl. I don't know how old she was, 12 or something, completely naked, burned, and the just the terror, just it's one, and that photo was attributed with hastening the end of that war. And then you get to have your own opinion from a war perspective, whether the end of that war was a good thing, a bad thing, how it ended, whatever. All I'm saying is I'm not arguing the relative merits. Oh, Dr. K, you think that, communism is great. What I'm saying is that the more up close and personal our view into a war zone is, the more human face we put on it. And there's never been, in World War II, you didn't have, the pictures of the atrocities. It wasn't until, the Allies liberated the concentration camps that people walked in and were just like, oh my God, to see what it had to sort of live in secrecy in order to live. Does that make sense? It had to live in the shadows without the light of day on it for that kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but for that kind of evil, that kind of pure evil to exist. And what we now have, and the first thing that dictators, this happened during the Arab Spring. If somebody wants to look that up and drop a link, but the first thing the dictator attempts to do is shut off social media. Why do you shut off social media? And I will bet you, I haven't seen it yet, but I will bet you all, man, I was about to go bold and say pizza for everybody, but that's a lot of pizza. But I'll bet something, candy bars for everybody, I don't know. But I'll bet that I believe we may see Putin attempt to shut down social media in Russia. I don't know if that's already happened. And the reason is because what he can't tolerate is, 90%, 80%, 70, some very large percent of the Russian population rising up in rebellion over what's happening. And the best thing that you can do to foster that is to show in up close and personal the lives of the people affected, the atrocities, the things that are going on the ground in Ukraine. And for a lot of the Russians, where there's, family members in Ukraine and relationships and no animosity culturally, but one of the things that Putin cannot endure is rebellion in Russia. And so I think that you will know that he's at a very desperate point in this process when he shuts down social media. And I want to just have the I told you so moment. So I'm going to go on record. That sometime before this is over, Russia's going to have social media shut off. One of the things that it does to shut off social media is it shuts off the ability of people trapped in a dictatorship to perceive that there are others like them and that they're not in the minority, that they are in fact the massive, powerful majority if they can actually just organize. So the best thing, in my view, that can happen for Ukraine is for Russians to rebel against their own dictatorship, government, depose Putin. And so I think that you'll know that is taking form. It's like part of the recipe. It's like part of the playbook for Arab dictators was shut off social media, try to shut off social media. But increasingly, we have a better ability, I think, to combat that kind of thing, to keep it up. And it's critical. So you can also talk about hate Facebook, hate Insta, Twitter. It's all sucking my life. We're going to watch The Social Dilemma, right? and talk about some of the negativity, the addiction, right? All the rest. Then a moment like this plays out, and you know what I want and wish for the Russian people? Social media. For the Ukrainian people, social media. It becomes huge. Becomes huge. Um, Let me see. How far behind are we on the threads? 32 minutes. Okay. Great comments, by the way. I'm going to just go zoomy. Jesse said, it's very interesting that we have so much data. Hard to know what's true. Yep. Feel like it's not great in a war. Nope. But it is what it is. And I don't think it's ever been, we can't know any better now what's true, I don't think, than we could in the past. But we have more information with which to judge. Therefore, I believe in the end it actually is easier because we have so much more volume. Um, Steve said, Anonymous taking down Russian's national news network and broadcasting what's really going on versus propaganda. Of course, then the propaganda is going to be that that's propaganda, that war never ends. Gidded said Ukraine is recruiting white hat hackers. Spencer, appreciate your comment about what you wrote your bulleted list on. I'm scanning down to where I've already been before, bouncing around. Steve posted an article about Anonymous. Some great articles here, you guys. Really, really great. Gidded said, points to the fact that tech companies can't be politically neutral. At some level, I agree with that. I think at some level, I think they should be. My own opinion is that companies in general and tech companies, specifically because that's my space, should be more politically neutral than they often are. But I also think that at the end of the day, you really can't be, not completely. All right, there we go. Matthew mentioned Starlink satellites. Um, Braden made a comment about, yeah, some Ukrainian official was the president of Ukraine who was tweeting to Elon Musk. Let me see. Down past the NATO discussion. Steve said back to NATO that NATO is an alliance not in favor of aggression. The only countries that are threatened by NATO are the aggressors. I think that's generally true. Let me see. I'm just going down to spots that I've already hit before. Let me see. Steve had more of a clarification on his picture. Um, Still false dichotomy, still false equivalence. My opinion, right? Always insert anything I say that, in my opinion. I'm not the arbiter of all truth. I know it feels like I am, but I'm not. Let me see. All right. So, Steve, I see you can. I know you were probably responding to what I was saying at 4:44. I still think you got a false. You're not selling me, Steve. It's still a false equivalence. Oh, thank you, Steve. That's the picture. That's the picture. It's so disturbing. It's so horrible. You know, it's just hard to see. It's hard to look at. Um, let me see. Yeah, but thanks. I mean, it's just a reminder. But the point is information. That photograph, which I'm pretty confident won a Pulitzer, um, it was information. It was data. It was about a moment on the ground. And so it's one thing to say this many people died, in a godforsaken jungle somewhere, and it's statistical. And then this is suddenly like, this is what's going on. This is what the thing is, this is the human cost. Um, Let me see. Daniel said, being far removed from something makes it easy. We're back now I'm only 8 minutes behind. Um, Daniel said, that's true. Being far removed from something makes it easy to, I don't know, propagate that thing via ignorance, I guess. Like you just ignore it or think it's not so bad, so it keeps happening. And I think that makes perfect sense, Daniel. I think you're right on. Um, Dave, do you think our current reactions are wishful thinking? Are we doing enough, or are we sitting on our hands like the beginnings of World War II? That is my question. That is absolutely my question. Hitler did, you know, the put it this way. I've been reading for some time. I'm kind of bogged down in the middle of it. There's a very thick book called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I think that's the name of the book. Really, really a good book. And when Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia, it was only about, well, there's this one part, and it's under dispute. And then basically he went in and tested the resolve, and nobody did anything. So he's like, okay, we'll take over all of Czechoslovakia. Nobody did anything. And then he massed a bunch of troops on the border of Belgium, and nobody brought troops to match those troops, you know, on the other side. So then he just decided, well, we'll just cross the border and see what happens. And nobody did anything. And at that point, he's like, well, guys, looks like it's party time, And in the middle of all that, you have, the most inept character in all of that was Neville Chamberlain, in my opinion, um, who was constantly, I think you just have to understand at some level that when somebody is either crazy or irrational or rational, but a heartless, tyrant, dictator, demagogue, whatever you want to call him, uh, there is no negotiation. There's only cost benefit analysis. Is it to their benefit to go ahead and go? But it's not like you're going to appeal. And I think it's the biggest negotiation mistake in any negotiation is to fail to understand the motivation of your opponent, to believe that your opponent is motivated by you, right? To which somebody else want to go find this. There's a song by Sting from Sting's first solo album that was called "The Dream of the Blue Turtles," and the song was called "Russians." It's a beautiful song. It's dark, and Sting is amazing. One of my all-time, deeply, deeply favorite musical artists. And more so as a solo artist than with the Police. And I've seen a few friends on social media post the song, but the lyrics to the song Russians, um, 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 if somebody wants to pull it up, but it starts off in Europe and America, there's a growing feeling of hysteria. I'm just going off the top of my head. Um, Conditioned to respond to all the threats in the rhetorical speeches of the Soviets. Um, Mr. Khrushchev says, we will bury you. I don't believe in this point of view. But what might save us, me and you, is if the Russians love their children too. And here's my problem. And then, um, uh, how can I save my little boy from Oppenheimer's deadly toy? There isn't no monopoly on common sense on either side of the political fence. Mr. Reagan says we will protect you. I don't subscribe to this point of view. But what might save us, me and you, is if the Russians love their children too. And here's again a huge Sting fan, and it's a very haunting song. Um, and I don't have it up. I'm just going from memory. But the problem is that the point I think is irrelevant because I think the Russians do love their children, and I think the Russian population loves their children. I can't say the same of Putin. You know, I think he's a heartless, power-hungry a-hole. You know, tyrants and dictators like that are not about loving children. They just don't care, I think. Or if they do, they don't show it very well. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that the problem is that when you've got a dictatorship and not a democracy or a democratic republic like we don't have a pure democracy. We have a democratic republic. But when you have a dictatorship, it's not about how the people feel, but it's about how the leader feels. And that's why I say that the best thing that could possibly happen is for the Russian people to rise up in revolt. Because if all of a sudden there's a civil war in Russia, it will just cripple the effort to go be an aggressor elsewhere. And I would hope the same thing would happen in the U.S. If we decided, hey, let's go invade Canada or whatever, let's go invade Mexico, we want their oil or whatever. If we took a move like that, I think that the White House would be burning down. I mean, I'm not advocating a particular course of action. I'm just saying I think that the consequences would be extreme. So that's, but it is about the population. So Dave, that's me saying I don't know, and I'm actually quite concerned because I don't know. I don't. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of rhetoric and a lot of thoughts and prayers, but at the end of the day, you know, and I'm all for thoughts and prayers. I'm not denigrating that. I'm just saying, you know, I don't know. I don't know enough. It's not my area of expertise. Um, Let me see it. Braden, yeah, shutting off social media shelters people. That is part of why you shut off social media. Um, Steve said, I think that thus far the world's reacted really quickly and justly to Russia's active war on Ukraine. The cutting off financial, that's huge. No one wants to join Ukraine directly in the war because Putin has already threatened nuclear war. And I don't know if that's true. I know he has veiled threat, go on, high alert nuclear forces, and I think that's what that's all about. I don't know if that's the actual answer, Steve. If that's why they're not. I don't know that that's why. I don't know if anybody actually believes. I think they're hoping that they can get this thing out without having to go there. Which is kind of what you said in your second half of the point, Steve. Countries doing what they can without directly affecting the war front. Dave said, a UVU professor suggests we may be committing the crime of complicity. And it does work. And I agree with you. I don't know that I agree. I don't know that I don't. And it definitely worries me. Oh, boom. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. So, Sandy, Russia to restrict Facebook access for censoring is right. So we're punishing Facebook. Yeah. Okay. I was already there, I guess. But that's not the extreme version of it. There's an extreme version where it just all the social media goes down. Thank you, Dave, for the article from the UVU professor on the author on the crime of complicity. Um, oh yeah, man, Sandy, Andy, whatever your name is, Andy. I think I called you Sandy earlier. I'm trying to parse your first name out of that. Going off of, are we doing enough or sitting on our hands? It takes a lot to get Switzerland to take sides. Excellent point. As an indicator, it doesn't tell the entire story, but I think that's a significant. The other thing is, how big is the consensus? Is the entire world, lined up against a particular thing, or is it kind of split? That's part of the issue, you know. Um, Dave, at some point, thuggery has to be met with thuggery. They already bought the tanks and bombs, right? Um, Let me see. Micah, thank you for the article. Yeah, Steve, there's the article about Putin putting nuclear forces on high alert. Wow, I'm actually caught up. Amazing with 7 minutes to go. I really don't know if he is just that crazy. But I think one thing will happen, and I think this is what's different. In World War II, it was, I mean, you'd think it was, well, it wasn't really precedented. Oh, yeah, World War One. Um, Somehow the lessons weren't learned. I believe that the lessons of World War II are so indelibly imprinted that if Putin lobbed a nuke, I think he has to know that Russia. And I'm talking out my butt now, right? I don't. It's not my area of expertise. I'm just a guy going armchair quarterback, right? But I believe that Putin has to know that if he lobs a nuke at anybody, then Russia, as he knows it, would cease to exist. I think that the political. I'm not talking about retaliation. I'm talking about that issue would go away somehow. It would be. I think he knows that that's a line you can't come. There's a reason why we tend to call these sorts of things the nuclear option. It's sort of like this point that you don't really come back from, you know. But what I think is really interesting is, the role of technology, the role of information, the role of data, right? Um, I've often noodled over this question. Uh, if you had, you look at the internet, just the internet in its broad sense. Just think of all the negative crap. You know what I mean? Spam. You can't just get along and have decent email. It's all spam. It's porn and it's abusive crap and it's violence and there's all this crappy crap that is enabled by the internet. There's a lot of really amazing things also enabled by the internet. And the question is, if you could get rid of all the crap, just take your favorite list of the stuff you wished didn't exist. Just take it as a personal exercise. This is the stuff I wish could go away from the internet, right? But you also have to lose all the good things you love about it. Would you take the deal? And by the way, it would include things like probably a lot of phone service, connectivity, and in this kind of a setting, I think at the end of the day, telecommunications and social media may prove very instrumental in mitigating and eliminating and shutting down this war. You know? Yeah, and Steve, I agree with you. Not sure that things like, net neutrality, the problem is it's an interesting thing that gets tossed around. That's another topic. We should talk about it. We should talk about net neutrality, shouldn't we? Because it's a really interesting and conflated issue. So Steve said, but Steve, in my thought experience, you said I don't think it's possible to get control of the bad, and you're only sacrificing the good. I agree with you, but in the thought experiment, if you could know that you could get rid of the bad, but you had to get rid of the good, would you take the deal? And I would not take the deal. I'd rather still have more information than less, even if by having less information I had less of the bad, because I would have less of the good. But when I have all the information, I can make a moral choice. I can make my own ethical choice. But I'd rather have it to make that choice from. I would rather go forward, not backwards, when it comes to information flow. And one of the interesting things is a lot of you are aware, during during World War II, one of the things that was punishable by death for a random citizen was possession of a mimeograph machine, where you put the little things on it, ka-chunk, 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 and it would print, right? The possession of a mimeograph machine was punishable by death. Why? Because you needed to stop the ability of people to rally, to have hope that there were others like them, that they could communicate. That communication is everything. So yeah, Steve. So it's just a thought experiment because there's no real way. Check it out, Daniel. Mimeograph. Yeah, Jesse. Yeah, that's the thought experiment is you got to, and I believe, uh, good and evil are meant to coexist in the world. I think it seems to be the nature of the world, and wishing that it didn't, to me, just simply denies reality. And I'd rather look at the reality and say, they're going to coexist. What do I do? They're side by side. What do I do? Um, but again, if I have all of it, I can make an ethical choice. I can make a moral choice per my own morality, per my own ethics. Okay. Yeah, last comments. Has this been interesting? I didn't schedule this, but man, we have the first invasion of a nation in Europe since World War II. And you see the fingerprint of technology on everything. And it just seemed like better to maybe spend our time with a little catharsis, a little group therapy, talking about some of that maybe today, as opposed to other more pedestrian topics like the history of computing. Alrighty, my friends. What do we got? Last comments. Dave, how am I in college and nobody talks about a European invasion that could precipitate World War III? Yeah, good point, Dave, and you are welcome. Um, Steve said, I don't think it's possible to sacrifice or neglect good or evil. I think each time you sacrifice good to destroy some form of evil, it ends up being 1 foot forward, 2 steps back. I agree with you, Steve. And I don't even think there are any logical fallacies there, Steve. Just FYI on that one. Anyway, alrighty. Hey, listen. Stay safe. It feels like everybody knows that there's going to be another COVID wave, right? Everybody knows this. Do we all know this? There's going to be another COVID wave. Has to be. Bet you pizza. I will pay everybody pizza if there isn't another COVID wave in the next, I'll give it 3 months, 4 months, somewhere out of the semester where you can't find me. Yeah. Anyway, you just stay safe, though. You know what I mean? Stay safe, do well, be good. You know, if you, I've been super busy, but if you want to chat, hit me up and I'll try to be available. But anyway, stay emotionally well, which is, I think, hard under the circumstances. It's been a hell of a ride for 2 years. We kind of need a break. So anyway, love y'all. Be good, be safe, and I will see you on Thursday. And it's March. We made it. We're halfway point. We made it halfway through the semester. Okay, see you, everybody.